It's Taj of the Beat.
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, guys, gals, and non-binary pals to another episode of All the Above, the show that gives you an unstandardized take on education. I'm Jeffrey Garrett, one of your co-hosts, and I've been a middle and high school principal and a high school social studies teacher. And as always, I am joined by
Manuel Rustin, your favorite teacher's favorite teacher. I'm a high school history teacher, and this, of course, is All the Above, where we take a look at issues in the realm of education. Now, Jeff, did you know that there are people listening to the audio podcast right now through Apple Podcasts?
I did.
They can rate us. They can rate us 5 stars out of 5, and those actually have a big role to play in the algorithms and all that stuff. So if you haven't subscribed yet or given us a thumbs up or rated and reviewed us, please take a moment to do that because we sure do appreciate it. Now, Jeff, what's on the agenda for this episode?
Well, we have a special episode. It's summertime. We're doing things a little bit differently. And I think in fitting fashion with a teacher special guest, one you might recognize, the wonderful Miss Mimi Dow is going to be with us. You might remember her from our first season. Still to this day, the only person to bring a living artifact to the show.
That is true.
To present on a show and tell segment. So first and only record holder in All the Above history. Mimi is back, and we are going to dig into an extended Do Now session. I know all the teachers out there can relate. Sometimes you have that that do now and you look up at the clock and 42 minutes later, it took a little more time than you thought. So we have lots of fantastic headlines. We're going to dig in today, just interesting stories in education. And Mimi's going to join us to talk them through. So it's going to be great. Stick around.
All right, let's get to it. All right, people, it's time for our Do Now. And we know a lot of you have been educators or currently educators, and there have been times where you had a warm-up or a do now for your class that was meant to be just a couple minutes and it ended up taking up the whole class period. Well, that's kind of the situation that we have going on here. We have an extended do now with a special guest who you may recognize from our first season, episode 7, where she presented a plant as her show and tell and spoke about the need to support students and love students on an individual basis based on their individual needs. And that guest is Miss Mimi Dow, high school English teacher extraordinaire, who joins us to look at some recent headlines in education. Jeff, how are we doing the Do Now today?
Well, today, Manuel, with the plethora of teachers we have on the panel here, it is only appropriate that we test the knowledge and wherewithal of our viewing and listening audience. So we have a pop quiz.
Ooh, pop quiz,
folks. Thinking caps on.
Ms. Dow, you ready for a pop quiz?
Oh, yeah, I'm ready.
Ready. Born ready.
All right.
All right, Jeff, what's the first quiz question for today?
Okay. First up today, folks. I like this question. Comes from the Midwest. I'm from the Midwest. Question is, how much does it cost to be a bully?
Ooh.
How much it costs? I feel like you should know.
Wow.
Because he bullies me all the time at work.
Wow. Wow.
Making
That's
fun
a
of me for
lie.
being short.
Salacious.
Guess we'll cut that
fake
out.
news. Fake news. All right, Jeff, how much does it cost?
Well, in Wisconsin, shout out to the Midwest, it would soon cost about $300. So, fascinating story out of Wisconsin Rapids. That town is considering an ordinance that would impose fines on the parents of young bullies. This comes in the wake of a February social media post showing handwritten notes that students had sent to a middle school girl urging her to kill herself in that district, right? So obviously pretty serious situation there. This proposed ordinance would hold the parents or guardians of children who engage in this type of behavior who are younger than the age of 18. It would hold the parents or guardians financially responsible, right? So penalties for a first offense would be about $50. Additional costs bringing that total up to $313. So Mimi, Manuel, interesting nugget here out of Wisconsin. What do you think?
To be perfectly honest, I'm undecided in terms of how I feel. Because on one hand, I'm thinking, it just reminds me of my world history teacher. And he was saying that the best way to motivate people is just to hit them where they lose money. So that might motivate some parents. But on the other side of me, like the educator side of me, is just thinking, what other things are they doing to prevent bullying? Is it just the fine that they have? Is that the only thing they got? It's also kind of weird that they're getting the police department involved in order to discipline students. When, like, what are the teachers doing? What are the administrators doing? What are the parents doing? What other solutions do they have? I hope it's just not the only solution that they have proposed.
Yeah, those are good questions. Yeah, definitely a lot to consider whenever you're talking about bringing law enforcement into a school situation, into something that's happening on your campus. Now, they modeled this after a neighboring town, Plover, Wisconsin. And the Plover Police Department in 2015 issued a similar ordinance fining parents for the bullying of for their kids being bullied. And the police chief in that area, Plover Police Chief Dan Alt, said that the department hasn't actually had to fine anybody. He says basically knowing that threat is out there has been enough to spread the word and awareness for parents to get on their kids and make sure their kids aren't participating in this behavior. So I don't know, I find that pretty interesting. I don't know that having parents pay fines over their child's behavior, if the parent already isn't being a solid parent in terms of helping the student avoid that bullying behavior, I don't know what a fine's going to do.
Yeah, because I'm wondering, how are they handling the situation with the student being bullied, the student doing the bullying? If you just fine the parents, I could imagine in certain situations it might help. In other situations, it might make the situation worse, because a parent might get really pissed at their kid and go home and make the situation even worse.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm just hoping it's not the only solution they have, is to fine the parents.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of a similar mind, because to me, I think the idea behind this system is interesting, right? We do it with some other aspects of life, like dog owners being held responsible if their dog bites someone or that kind of thing. And I don't mean to compare children with dogs.
No, that's what you said. That's what you said.
But like the construct is
Wow.
the same, right? You put the
Yeah.
fine on the adult, and the adult will take responsibility and make sure the bad things don't happen, right? I just wonder whether that's like the right assumption about how bullying works, right? Like are the kids who are engaging in this level of bullying behaving that way because their parents are not engaged in their lives or in their education, right? It seems to suggest that that's the cause. I would wonder, I'm not a bullying expert, but just anecdotally in my experience, a lot of times some of the kids who do the worst bullying in this case are acting out on issues that are really starting at home, right?
Yeah.
And so I would wonder similarly, like, is this actually going to solve the problem? You know, we'll find out, I guess. But there's a lot of assumptions built into this, this accountability mechanism here.
Yeah, for sure. All right, next quiz question. Difficult question here. What costs $50 million and doesn't teach kids anything?
So many things.
So many things. Weekend with Donald Trump, perhaps, and his kids at Mar-a-Lago.
Always got to go there.
Yes, I do. Bring it, trolls. Bring it.
Always.
I don't know. $50 million is a lot. I don't understand those numbers.
It's
I don't understand. Is that what you said?
It's a lot of zeros.
I mean, I can't relate
So many
in my
zeros.
personal life.
it's a lot of zeros and a lot of comments. All right, so in this case, this is a story out of California where a network of charter schools is alleged to have stolen more than $50 million from the state by creating phantom institutions that enrolled unwitting students it found through other schools and youth programs. So A3 Education recruited small public school districts to sponsor these online charter schools in exchange for oversight fees. And prosecutors allege that A3 enrolled about 40,000 students throughout the state, none of whom received any services. The company operated a network of 19 online-only schools, and it's accused of paying sports leagues at as little as $25 a student for information that they then use to phantomly, I don't know if that's a word, enroll these students into their online schools. Students didn't know how their names were being used, and prosecutors identified Sean McManus and Jason Schrock as the ringleaders. What do you guys think? $50 million for phantom schools.
Yeah, so my take is, I think, Manuel, this is like way far at the end of crazy scandalous stuff that happens with charter schools. So I want to say up front, not all charter schools are just running off for $50 million.
Right.
On the other hand, there's no reason we should be operating in a world where a system could get away with taking $50 million
that's a lot.
without some greater type of oversight. So I understand, and I've done some work with folks in charter schools, and contrary to popular opinion, there's lots of regulations that they have to follow.
Right.
But there's clearly not enough regulations that they have to follow if they can walk off with $50 million for phantomly educating 40,000 kids.
Yeah.
What do you think, Ms. Dow?
Damn.
Damn, that's right.
Good answer.
That's a lot of money. So, because you said that they recruited small public school districts to sponsor
Right.
charter schools. You had $25 a student is how much it costs.
So that's how much they paid their sports leagues to sort of hand over their rosters. Not hand over, but like, hey, $25 per kid. Give me their name, their state ID number, presumably birth dates, so we can enroll them in these schools.
Because it just makes me wonder for how long it was going on. And like how many people had to have been involved? It had to have been more than 11 people.
Yeah, so
Even though
11
only
people were
11
indicted.
people were being indicted.
Yeah.
Because to steal that much money to enroll, how many?
40, was it 40? Yeah, 40,000 students.
40,000 students and not have anybody not raise a red flag sooner
Right.
to lose that much money. I feel like more people had to have been involved than 11 people.
Well, to be fair, the California Charter Schools Association says it raised concerns about A3 more than a year ago with the state education department. So the Charter Schools Association apparently, pointing the finger at this online group and say, look into this because something fishy is going on. And it took quite some time for charges to come through. But of those 11 indicted, at least one of them is a school board member who basically collected these oversight fees in exchange for allowing these networks to exist. So it wasn't just these two charter guys, it was people within the public school system who also played a role.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of layers of kind of the sad story behind this, right? These two gentlemen who are referred in the article as ringleaders, right? Appropriately so, right? Like not school administrators.
Yeah, and one dude's not even in the U.S. anymore. He's
Yeah.
in Australia.
Yeah, so hopefully we can extradite him or something. They apparently purchased a $1.6 million house and stashed money in a bunch of private accounts. I mean, this is like old school gangsterism, right?
Yeah.
So, it's hard for me to not feel that kind of deep outrage about this because I'm thinking about what $50 million could do spread out across the schools that I work with, right? And to think that these folks were just purely profiting and delivering no services to students of any real measure that we can tell. So crazy story for sure.
All right. Next headline. What we got?
All right, so give a 9-year-old $75, and what do you think he's going to do with it?
That's a lot of Jolly Ranchers, man. When I was
I
9,
think Pokemon cards.
I was thinking
some now laters,
straight to GameStop or
maybe
something.
maybe a Super Soaker.
Yeah, I don't think they make those anymore.
No,
Do they?
okay.
I remember when Super Soakers came out.
Yeah,
man,
that was all the
it
rage.
lit.
You didn't have to do the pumping anymore.
Nah,
You could,
it was lit. Miss Dow's like, what are Super Soakers?
What are they
She's
talking
too
about?
young for that. All right, so Miss Dow, what would that 9-year-old do?
So apparently, a 9-year-old paid off his classmates' lunch debts like a boss.
Wow.
Just paid it off. So there's a 9-year-old boy in Napa, California. He recently used his allowance money to pay off the lunch debt for his fellow third graders. And after a conversation with his mom about the kids who couldn't afford school lunches, Ryan Kirkpatrick, decided to actually pay off all the debt for his classmates.
Man, all right, so $75 to pay off these lunch debts at this elementary school. 9-year-old kid didn't have to do it. It's his allowance money. I guess in one sense, it's like good for him, honorable for him, like way to go. But what the hell we have lunch debts for in 2019?
Yeah. I'm definitely of two minds. On the one hand, I'm like, hey, sounds like a nice kid, very upstanding thing to do, care for your friends and neighbors. Like, we want young people to be like this.
Right.
On the other hand, what kind of ridiculous system are we running where 9-year-olds have to think about paying off the debts of their peers.
Classmates.
Like they're 9. They should be buying Now and Laters and Super Soakers.
They
and
should be.
Super Soakers,
whatever
no.
9-year-olds
Super
buy today with $75.
They buy apps and in-app purchases.
Yes, I'm
Jeff.
old. I'm old. Just painfully old. So I also feel like a certain sense of outrage about like, how did this 9-year-old even conceive of the need for this, right? Like, what is broken in our system that's requiring this? And it kind of reminds me of the Philando Castile story that we've certainly talked about on a few different episodes, and the kind of nobility of paying off school lunch, but also the absurdity of having to pay off school lunch debt for young people.
Yeah. It's because he's amazing, right? He's like an angel to even think about doing that. It says that he normally would have spent that money on sports gear for himself. So the fact that he would even give up $75 for his classmates to make sure that his classmates didn't have that debt anymore, I think is really nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is sad. It's sad that there are so many systemic issues that a 9-year-old would have to step in and do that. But the adults have not created a school system where the students don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, exactly. And this school claims that even students who owe money still get their hot meal, so they're not withheld food, but these debts do accumulate. And why are we teaching our elementary school kids about debt in the first place, and why are we letting them have the burden of debt and the anxiety that comes with facing the lunch employee and knowing that you have a debt and this lunch employee is going to look up your number and add to that debt? Like, just even that anxiety, why should any elementary school student have to experience that at all? Like, school lunch should just be covered, like include it in our education funding so that no student has to worry about whether or not they get a meal at lunch, but also no student has to worry about debts, and no hero 9-year-old has to sacrifice his own allowance money to clear a problem that really originated with the adults.
Yeah. Or the fact that it's not even the school system itself, but the fact that just there aren't enough institutions in place where the families can't afford to pay those debts off themselves.
Yeah.
Because I think it's great if you have a school that can give free food to all the students, but at the same time, I'm worried about always putting it on the schools. They feel like the schools can solve every single problem out there in society.
Yes.
There has to be more institutions in place.
I'm so glad you said that, actually, Mimi, because I was getting caught up in kind of the individual drama with Ryan. But I think you're raising this really important point, which is we live in a society where there's a routine practice of having to feed children at school with public resources because we have so many families that cannot afford to feed their children at home. Right. And so what's wrong with with how we've set up our economy, where we have so many families that don't have the resources to feed their children, right? Like, we're clearly, we want to talk about a $15 minimum wage and these sorts of things, but when we break that down to human terms, we're living in an economy where families are sending their kids to school hungry. Because they don't have the resources to pay for food, right? And school lunch is a nice Band-Aid for that, but we also have a bigger problem, I think, to address of let's help families be able to provide for their children.
Yeah, because it's hard to focus when you're hungry. I can't focus when I'm hungry.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'm hungry right now.
We could pause the show and have a little recess, have a little lunch break. I do wonder, though, if Ryan showed up to school with this $75 like in ones and walked into the cafeteria like a boss, just like fanning himself with this money and just kind of just like tossing it on the counter. I hope he at least included some bit of drama, because that could be pretty dope. Making it rain as a 9-year-old, man.
Wow.
Lasting memory.
Wow. Okay. Next question.
Next question.
All right. Do online classes boost high school graduation rates?
I'm going to say yes. And there's a 50-50 chance I get that right.
That's an outstanding teacher question with a 50-50 chance. Manuel, do you agree?
Yes.
True or false?
I'm copying her answer. I'm going to say yes.
Okay. Well, the answer, you were wrong, because the answer is yes, but not exactly yes.
That's mostly a yes.
So you get partial credit. A recent study by Carolyn Heinrich and Jennifer Darling Anduata out of Vanderbilt University called Does Online Course Taking Increase High School Completion and Open Pathways to Post-Secondary Education Opportunities? That's a mouthful. This study looked at data from an 8-year longitudinal period of students taking online courses in their high schools. They found that students who took online courses were about 13% more likely to graduate than similar students who didn't take those courses. So there's your partial credit.
That's the yes.
However, these students
Still
don't
yes, though.
seem.
Still the yes, though. I mean,
However, these students don't seem to be learning as much as their peers in regular face-to-face classes. So I think lots of educators out there who've taught some of these classes or been around these kinds of experiences can understand this. It's easier to earn the credit, but maybe suspect as to whether the learning is the same. So, Mimi, Manuel, what do you think?
Well, this past year I actually taught a class, a class where students in the class actually enrolled in Acellus online courses. They were able to graduate because they were able to make up credit classes that they had, failed previously. Or maybe they were trying to get into college, so they had passed with a D, but they wanted to now go to college, which they didn't have those aspirations when they were younger, when they were in 9th or 10th grade. So now they were able to retake a lot of classes online and get those units earned. So that was a good thing. But for sure, when I was walking around the classroom and trying to help the students with their online courses, it seemed like, just me by myself, I think I'm a pretty smart person, and a pretty good student, but I haven't taken math in 10 years. So I was trying to help students with their math courses, trying to help them with history courses, English courses online, trying to just help all these different students who were making up different classes online. And I'm not an expert in all those different subjects. I remember, how to do different equations, but once you get to higher level of math, I haven't done that in so long, so I couldn't really help them with that. So we were both just sitting next to each other trying to watch the video and learn it. And definitely that student probably would have learned better if they had an actual math teacher, an actual English teacher, an actual history teacher. But yeah, it does help them make up credits, which is a positive thing, especially when those students, some of them already know the material. The reason why they didn't pass class was because they didn't submit the work, but they had the skills already. Right. But the students who failed because they didn't have the skills, now they're struggling and they might even just fail it the second time online.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, I'm not too surprised by the results of the study based on, what you said, students are taking these online courses and without a teacher who's an expert in that discipline area, how are they even getting through in terms of are they learning nearly as much as if they were in a physical class where they were doing different collaborative activities with other classmates and had a teacher to give them the one-on-one guidance. So to me, it's no shocker that online courses don't boost learning. So the study found that the more online courses a student took, the worse that student did on district-wide standardized tests. So to me, that's not too surprising. I've taken some online courses in the past for various salary credit things, and definitely I didn't learn as much as I did in my classes in college and in grad school where there was an actual professor who was an expert in that field. And I think that we look to online education a little bit too much to solve some of the problems that we have. So I know a lot of districts have moved to online courses as their primary credit recovery in place of summer school teachers, for example. So budget-wise, it costs less to enroll students in these online courses than it does to hire a teacher to teach that U.S. history class over the summer. And it might help solve the budget constraints, but is it boosting learning? According to this study and according to our own anecdotal experience, nah.
Yeah, I think what this really calls out to me is one of the core fundamental truths we know about learning, which is it's a social process. And in as much as online learning platforms can offer some approximation of the social process of learning, they aren't actually a full replacement of that. In the same way, actually, as social media offers a proxy for friendship and for social interactions, but we see, people who spend all their time on social media and are depressed and feel disconnected, right? And I'm not saying online learning makes you depressed and feel disconnected, but there's something missing when the screen is kind of mediating the interaction, right? And when you don't have the ability to to talk to people next to you and to read people's body language when they're making an argument or saying something. So it's not at all surprising to me that online learning boosts graduation rate. It's certainly an efficient way to offer credit-bearing opportunities to lots of students in quick succession. But I don't think it can be thought of as a replacement for classroom seat time learning.
Like the actual instruction,
Yes.
right? Because there were a couple students that I had in my class who only failed because they didn't get along with their teacher, for example. So it was mostly like a personality conflict or just butting heads with the teacher. So they already had the skills. So just taking the online course helped them get those credits without having to be in that teacher's classroom again. So that was a positive situation for that student. But for the students who just don't even have the skills and they're just trying to go through the routines, and I'm sure, online classes are also easier to cheat in. So it can't replace the actual
Definitely
learning.
heard that critique before, for sure. Yeah.
All right, next quiz question. Let's see what we got. All right, quiz question for y'all.
Okay.
How many LGBTQ historical figures can you name off the top of your head?
Okay.
I can name maybe 5. I know there are more than 5.
I'm just gonna start
There's
with
so many more.
So Shakespeare, Langston Hughes,
Virginia Woolf,
Byron Rustin,
Harvey Milk.
Milk, RuPaul.
Shakespeare? I didn't know.
That's what I read.
When you said that, I was like, really?
Yeah.
I'm the English teacher, damn.
I don't
know that.
I don't know. Never knew that. Well, according to my own.
See, but we didn't know because we
James
never taught those
Baldwin?
things.
What do you mean you were never
James
taught those
Baldwin,
things?
Yeah.
So you're saying your high school curriculum didn't include?
I don't think. Nope.
Interesting. According to
Yeah.
my high school history learning, gay people did not exist until the 60s and 70s. So, because I was never taught anything about any historical figures who were gay.
No.
So, Noble Ingram for the 74 wrote a really fascinating piece that we'll link on our website, taking a look at the state of LGBTQ curriculum across the nation. And in his piece, he cites the fact that Colorado and New Jersey have recently followed the footsteps of California, which was the first to mandate recognition of the contributions of LGBTQ people in history and social studies curricula. So that brings us to 3 states where it's mandated that schools include the contributions of LGBTQ people in history and social science, but similar measures are underway currently in New York and Illinois. Other states, including Alabama and Arizona, have voted to lift restrictions against including LGBTQ content, and a flurry of state policy changes are going on throughout the nation regarding this matter. Now, a national LGBTQ education organization known as the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network found that schools with inclusive curricula were more likely to report feelings of acceptance towards LGBTQ students and have lower rates of student absenteeism linked to feeling unsafe. And currently we have 8 states that have legislation that restricts LGBTQ content in the classroom. But despite the fact that 42 states don't restrict it, a recent study by the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network found that only about a quarter of teachers incorporate LGBTQ topics into their lessons. So it looks like states are slowly getting there with doing a better job of teaching about the contributions of LGBTQ people. What do you guys think?
Well, when I saw the article, they have a nice map of the country, right? And kind of color coded based on where states are at. And on the one hand, it's kind of sad because I would say my education as a young person was pretty similar to yours in that I don't recall there being a mention of LGBTQ people explicitly, like out LGBTQ people. I think in high school was probably the first time that I can recall. I remember one of my English teachers talking about Langston Hughes being gay, and it was like a very interesting moment because like that was never talked about in school, right? Even though like there were other students who we knew were gay, right? And like it wasn't like a secret, but there was a lot of silence in terms of the curriculum, right? And so. The only perhaps positive thing on that map was that they used the color gray to show the states that neither prohibit nor have a law in favor of saying like you have to acknowledge the presence and humanity of LGBTQ people. And so, at least in those states, we're not having to like climb over a prohibition, right?
Right.
We can just add the inclusivity, which I think legally is hopefully a somewhat easier and quicker process to get to better versions of curriculum than we have now, which I think are still largely silent, right? And so, or dependent upon the individual teacher who's maybe educated or aware or intentional about speaking to the presence of LGBTQ people and their contributions to our society, which are numerous, right? As with many communities in our society. So, it's both like sad to look at and maybe hopeful from the standpoint of there's momentum building in some places, and hopefully that will catch fire across the country.
Yeah. I'm also wondering who's going to write the curriculum in terms of, because it says it mandates it, right? So it mandates recognition of the contributions of LGBTQ people in history and social studies curricula. So I'm just wondering who they would get to write it, just because, and we were talking about this earlier, about with social justice like units and ethnic studies and everything. Like just because you put that label on it doesn't mean that you're doing it right and you're doing it correctly. Yeah. So I like the movement and the progress in terms of trying to include it and in trying to just have them be seen and have the students feel seen, like they can find figures in history and in the classes that they can relate to. But yeah, my next thought would be just be who's writing the curriculum and how is it going to be implemented. Because just because you have a training, if you send a bunch of teachers to a training for 1 or 2 days or even a week, doesn't mean that they can teach it properly. Because if the teachers themselves have like implicit biases or something.
Or explicit biases.
Oh yeah,
as it may
in
be.
the really bad scenarios.
Yeah.
Then they're probably not going to do it justice.
Yeah.
So I would be worried about how do I say this? Like I'm happy that they're moving in that direction, but I'd also be, just because a state's saying that we have it now doesn't mean that you're doing it correctly or doing it properly.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. California being one state where it's mandated, and the article mentions that a lot of teachers feel that they are either unprepared to do that topic justice, or they're worried about parent pushback for their students going home and be like, guess what we learned about, and then the parents calling up the school with that fear. But in California, I mean, there's curricular resources out there. The social science frameworks were updated with plenty of information in there to help teachers and guide teachers. It's really important. I'm glad you bring up that question. It's really important that this doesn't become just a civil rights movement, Bayard Rustin, and oh yeah, he was gay, and move on. But something deeper and something much more inclusive than just saying like, oh, this person happened to be gay, this person happened to be gay, but more looking at sort of the bigger issues and the bigger struggles, and also the bigger contributions than just happening to be gay at the time. So, but it is promising that nationally we're slowly head in that direction. I was surprised to see Alabama listed as a place where they lifted restrictions against including LGBTQ information or topics in studies, but the article again by Noble Ingram cites that in a lot of states it's politically easier to lift the restriction than it is to go the next step and the more important step, which will be to mandate that schools actually do this. So yeah, because it's kind of like how health classes are mandated, but it doesn't mean that our students get great health classes all the time. Well, our students at our particular schools where we each work get great stuff, but nationally and other places, you are correct. Yeah, and I would hope they would remember like things like intersectionality too. So they're including LGBTQ people of color, and not just having like, not that there's anything wrong with white people, but diversity even among that. For sure. My bad. Yeah, I was poorly worded.
Duly noted. Not anything wrong with white people.
All right, folks. Final quiz question for today. What do we got? What's our last quiz question?
All right, folks. We're actually not going to have a question for this last story because this story is kind of serious, and we want to make sure we're doing it justice. So, this story harkens back to the tragic incident at Parkland, in Parkland, Florida, at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. And there is recent news about the former school-based police officer at that school who has been charged with negligence in connection with his actions on the day of that school shooting. So as the shots rang out at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School last year, Scott Peterson, who was the school school resource officer assigned to the campus, chose not to engage the shooter. He remained outside of the campus, and this kind of ignited a bit of a firestorm in the community about, what his role should have been and whether he should have responded or, waited for other first responders. And he is now facing charges for negligence, which has been met with mixed reactions. Has been met with both kind of excitement and relief from some of the families of the victims, and also I think lots of questions about is this fair, or are we promoting more heavily militaristic policing if we're going to say you lose your job and lose your pension if you don't run in and start shooting back. Mm-hmm. So sad and disturbing story, but also this interesting question about kind of the role of policing on school campuses in a world where mass shootings continue to happen. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, there's wide-ranging implications here based on what ends up happening to this officer, and I don't think that anybody is happy with the fact that he didn't do the most that he could to intervene in that shooting incident. But I, for one, personally, don't know that he should be legally accountable for what happened for several reasons. One reason being, this is a devastating incident where 17 people were killed, and I'm sure he had, a police-issued handgun, and I don't know that itself would have been enough. I don't know that he going in there guns blazing wouldn't have contributed to more loss of life. And I don't know that we want to live in a world where armed police officers are at every school and are legally obligated to jump right into a situation that they might not know much about, because again, like critics say, that might just lead to a more militaristic culture among school-based police officers who are thinking about their obligation in a school shooting for an event that happens far too much in our country. But statistically, the odds of any individual school resource officer being in that situation are so minuscule that I don't know that we want them all out there, guns ready, and thinking about the legal implications if they don't run in there fast enough. So it's just a real murky legal area, I think.
And I have a question. Because when it says that he's being charged because he chose not to engage the gunman, is it because they want him to have shot the gunman, or did he not even try to even talk the gunman down?
He didn't go in.
He didn't even go in, right? Because he remained outside.
Yeah, and waited for SWAT and other armed law enforcement officers to arrive on the scene. And I think the contention from the families and from some of the people who are happy to see his prosecution is that by statute, law enforcement officers are expected to intervene when they're on the scene of this kind of incident. And that apparently was a policy change that shifted. It hasn't always been that way, but maybe for the last 10 years or so, it's been an expectation. So they're arguing that he was kind of in dereliction of his duty, or it was negligence, and that there could have been lives that could have been saved had he actually gone into the campus and scared the shooter off, or actually been able to stop the shooter, or even distract the shooter into defending himself instead of trying to kill more students. Right. And so I hear those arguments, and I don't dismiss them.
Because I remember reading about that and being upset myself when I heard that there was a police officer there who did not go inside and try to do anything about it, and that did upset me. Like, emotionally, I reacted to that. I don't know if I would want him to just go in and start shooting, immediately. Yeah. I would want him to go in, just kind of gauge the situation and just try to help in any way.
And he did not do that. There's surveillance footage showing him clearly hearing the shots and kind of pacing around, apparently, I guess, trying to figure out what to do, and then deciding not to go in because he stays out. I forget how many minutes he stayed out there, but it was a very significant amount of time.
So that's why I do think that he should have had some sort of consequence for that, for not doing his job. But I also don't know if he should be taken to court, because like you said, there are implications, like wider implications, right? If they have a certain kind of ruling or certain kind of punishment with him, that other police officers who are on campus might go in to another situation much more aggressively than they otherwise would have.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the fear. That's the fear that a lot of critics are bringing up. I wonder about the teachers in Florida who will soon be armed, because Florida passed legislation recently allowing teachers who want to voluntarily follow this process of training and being able to be armed on campus to do that. I wonder what his prosecution means for any of those teachers that might be facing an incident and don't respond fast enough, or respond so fast that they harm somebody who was an innocent victim, and maybe their defense is this person got prosecuted for not jumping in, so I jumped in right away to avoid prosecution, and because of that, maybe it's just such a
or if the shooter is a student, for example, like how would you know which person is? Obviously, if you see it,
right.
But sometimes you just wouldn't know. I feel like we're not John Wick. Like we don't have that kind of aim.
We're not John Wick. We're not.
Where these people can just.
Yeah.
So I'm in the middle where I feel like he should have a consequence, but I'm not sure if. I'm just wondering what the punishment would be for him.
Yeah.
If he's charged.
Yeah. To me, and I'm gonna put out some troll bait. So Russian bots
Tag
and
him,
right wing nuts, get your mouses ready. But I think this story really speaks to the insanity of the larger issue that we're facing, which is having to militarize our schools to deal with military-style mass shooter incidents. And whatever steps we take, they're having negative consequences on the students involved. We're arming teachers. We're criminally prosecuting police officers who don't run into campus guns ablazing with a significant likelihood of shooting the wrong students, right? Whether intentionally or on accident, right? And so we should not be in this situation, because we should have more sensible gun control in this country that takes this kind of incident off the table. So it's a complex situation. Certainly our thoughts are with the survivors, of course, in Parkland, and I hope maybe this brings them some additional level of peace. But we certainly have our work to do to actually prevent these kinds of things from happening.
Those are facts, Jeff, and we love facts on all the above. Well, Mimi, I think that's the end of the line for this Do Now, which extended through our whole lesson plan. Thank you for stopping by again.
Been there.
Thank you for stopping by, and you're welcome to come back anytime. And up next, folks, is our Class Dismissed. All right, people, now it's time for Class Dismissed, where we like to shout out people doing excellent things in the world of education. And for this Class Dismissed, we'd like to give a very special shout out to all of you teachers out there who are enjoying your summer break. We know that the school year can be massively intense and stressful, and you put in so much work. So shout out to you, whether or not you are taking the time with family, whether or not you're traveling. Some of you might be engaged in professional development, trying to plan for the upcoming school year. Some of you might just be parked on your couch, watching Netflix and Hulu and all that. And of course, watching our show and liking our page and giving us a thumbs up and all that stuff. So shout out to you, however you are enjoying your summer. Enjoy it, because you have earned it.
Yeah, I'm going to second all that. And I'm also going to say, we hear you and see you, educators, because we know all those myths out there that are like, well, teachers get, 3 months off in the summer. First of all, nobody has 3 months off in the summer. Second of all, most teachers are working for a good chunk of the summer, whether they're teaching summer school or whether they're preparing curriculum or, looking at data or helping with, things at the school site.
Or working a second job trying to bolster that meager pay that they get for teaching.
Shout out to Oklahoma and West Virginia and Arizona, and
Indeed.
you know about that. So I just want to say, for educators who are working hard this summer, find some time to unwind. You need it. Make sure you're taking good care of yourself. And for those of you who are on vacation, enjoy it and don't feel bad about it, because you earned it.
Indeed. All right, folks. So that about does it for episode 17 of All of the Above. Please remember, if you haven't already, head over to our YouTube channel and hit that subscribe. It's youtube.com/alloftheabove. And remember to like our Facebook page and follow us however you follow your podcast. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time. Do online classes boost high school graduation rates?
Oh, okay. This is actually a story I didn't read, so give me a second.
Wow. Yeah. We are not cutting that out. We're going to let our audience know. We are going to let them know.
I'm sorry. Let's try it again.
We still rolling?
Okay. All right.
Good, because I'm throwing all that in the episode.
All right. Ready?
Yeah.
Starting over, right?